I counted the minutes before I set his world on fire. Because when you're humiliated in front of a dozen people, people who know exactly what's happening and still say nothing, something inside you fractures. And from that fracture, something new begins to grow. Not rage, not revenge, precision, control. The absolute certainty that you will not only survive this, but make them regret giving you the reason to. Evan gave me mine. On a Tuesday morning, in conference room B, with stale coffee in my mug and a slideshow I'd built over 2 months cued on screen. "Cancel her flight," he said flatly, without looking at me. "Women don't close enterprise deals." Then he handed my deck to Jonah, a junior rep barely 2 quarters in who still thought QBR meant something fun. The others looked away, looked down, looked through me. No one laughed. No one needed to. The air vent hummed like it always did, a low mechanical whine that somehow made the silence louder. I didn't argue. I didn't blink. I counted faces. 10. I noted the meeting title glowing on the wall screen. Q4 Strategic Forecast, Client Acquisition. I wrote the names of everyone present, 1 per line, in my notebook. That same notebook I'd used since onboarding. Clean handwriting. 1 page per betrayal. Under that list, I wrote a single phrase. Make it cost him. Then I closed the notebook, folded my hands, and waited for the meeting to end. People kept working very hard at not looking at me. It's funny how silence can be a performance. They think if they don't say the words, they aren't part of it. But they are. Silence is a signature when you know what's happening and choose stillness. And every one of them signed. Back at my desk, I stared at my phone screen. Mortgage payment due. Friday. A text from my sister. Tuition's late again. Can you cover it? Just until next month? I flipped the phone face down and slid it beside my keyboard like it might explode if I looked too long. Then I opened my laptop. I messaged Ronnie, the client lead I'd been working with for 6 weeks. Do you have the board committee schedule and your supplier steps? A beat passed. Then a thumbs up. I saw her message and felt something shift. Small, but real. Like a door cracked open just enough to slip through. That afternoon, I received a mass email from our EVP. The subject line was, Leadership Message, Alignment and Vision. Inside, a quote. Something polished and firm about resilience, agility, shared mission. But the words were mine. A sentence I'd written 2 months ago in a white paper Evan had reviewed. Except now it was his name beneath it. I highlighted the sentence. My cursor hovered for a second. Then I whispered, I see you. And I closed my laptop without a sound. That night, I went home and opened a fresh page in my notebook. On it, I wrote 2 columns, public actions and private leverage. I listed what I had, timelines, deck authorship, email threads, client conversations, procurement steps, and above it all, Evan's casual dismissal, the kind that sinks into skin and festers. I poured a glass of water and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't angry. I was awake. He thought the game was won because no one called him out, because people like me get tired, because we need the paycheck, the stability, the reference. But what Evan didn't understand, and what most men like him never do, is that desperation sharpens the blade. I didn't need to swing it today or tomorrow, but the edge would stay ready. The next morning, I came in earlier than usual, walked the perimeter of the floor like a sentry, made coffee, smiled at assistants, checked my prints, verified metadata, every small move a brick in the wall I was building. Quiet, steady, unmistakable. In the kitchen, I overheard Jonah trying to explain the product's AI module to the intern. He stumbled, badly, said, neural something something. I made a note in my head. If Evan really planned to run the client demo without me, I hoped he was ready to eat glass. Back at my desk, Adam from legal showed up with his usual toothpaste smile. "Hey, just checking. Do you want us to lock your laptop for travel? Just security stuff." I smiled. "Thanks, but no need. I've got it covered." He looked almost disappointed, like he was hoping I'd say yes. At lunch, I ate alone on the 14th floor balcony and watched Evan through the window, pacing in one of the fishbowl conference rooms. He was on a call, animated, hands slicing the air, probably taking credit for work he didn't understand, probably lining up the next win on the back of my silence. But here's the thing. He mistook silence for surrender. I wasn't done. I was just getting into position. I started with coffee, not because I needed caffeine, but because assistants and ops folks talk best with a warm cup in hand. They're the ones who know when a calendar invite means more than it says, who can tell you when a touch point is really a decision and when optional means don't miss it unless you're ready to be forgotten. They don't get quoted. They get remembered. I needed that kind of memory right now. I walked past the executive kitchen and made eye contact with Carrie, who handled board prep. "You've got a lot on your plate with the new vendor cycle," I said lightly. She paused, blinked, then nodded toward the pantry. "We've been swamped. Finance keeps asking for early figures. I'm not even sure who they're backing anymore." That was all I needed. One thread. I didn't pull it. Not yet. I just marked it. I scheduled short meetings with 2 people in procurement ops, just 15 minutes each. One question from me: when you think about the client's next steps, what's the sequence? And one follow-up: who makes the call, really? That's when I saw it. A shape forming behind the paper trail. A third-party group pushing integration layers that nobody asked for. Just enough jargon to hide the price hike. They weren't even pretending to innovate. They were padding, quietly, with numbers puffed up like a winter coat. I mapped it on a single sheet. Who referred the vendor, who touched the approval line, who used fast track in the notes. All of it legal, none of it clean. The pattern was clear. Someone friendly to Evan had teed it up, and Evan was setting me up to take the fall if it collapsed. That afternoon, I sent a polite, structured email to Dr. Elena Alvarez, the client's compliance lead. 2 paragraphs, no drama, just process clarity, request for insight, and 1 link to the supplier documentation chain. I didn't accuse, I invited. She replied an hour later. "Helpful. If there's more, send it off the main thread." That reply told me 2 things. 1, she saw it. 2, she wanted it outside official lines. She wasn't posturing. She was protecting. That made her rare. I sent a thank you and said nothing more. Let it settle. Around 5:15, Ronnie sent me a calendar export, client-side meeting structure, color-coded by committee. She added 1 note. Keep it small. People are nervous. Practical, not timid. That's why I liked her. She didn't reach for drama. She reached for the next clear step. I walked the office floor at 6:45. The main lights were off, but the CFO's glass-walled office still glowed. Then, suddenly, dark. I wrote the time down. Not because it meant anything yet, but because it might. I passed Evan's office, empty. His jacket was still on the back of the chair, his laptop cable coiled tight on the desk. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I was building sequence, not scandal. At home, I opened a fresh document titled Thread Map. It was just a list of dots. People, timestamps, phrases. Not evidence, not yet. But context. Context is what catches the hand before the fall. I reread Evan's email from earlier that week, the one with my words beneath his name. The phrase was exact, down to the preposition. I didn't care about the quote itself. I cared about what it meant. He was still using my voice even while trying to erase me. That felt like a thumbprint left in the middle of wet paint. I watched it dry. By Thursday, I had lunch with Alan in technical sales. We talked about hockey. Then he said, "You hear about the pipeline reset?" I hadn't. He leaned in. Evan's scrubbing the list, moving numbers forward, which meant he was setting up to claim fast wins, and I was one of the ghosts he'd pretend never touched the deal. Friday morning, I got an alert. The client had paused procurement talks. No explanation, but my gut already knew. Someone leaked a version of the numbers, the padded ones, and someone else pointed a finger in my direction. The moment I read the notice, the floor felt colder. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out over the traffic. I wasn't scared. I was ready. Evan thought throwing me out would end the problem. He didn't realize I was already past the point of persuasion. I was operating on signal now, cause and effect. That afternoon, I went back to my notebook. I wrote the phrase, "information leak," and underlined it once. Not because I believed it, but because I knew what it would become. The reason they'd use to box me out, reduce my access, isolate my name. I flipped the page and wrote one more word in ink: sequence. The story they were building had a gap. I just had to widen it until the light poured through. I didn't need a smoking gun. I needed a pattern. The first thing I did was stop pretending I wasn't being watched. The sudden helpfulness from legal, the shift in calendar invites, the way certain names stopped CCing me. It wasn't paranoia. It was orchestration, which meant someone thought I was a threat. Good. I stopped asking questions aloud. I started pulling records the public way. Open databases, vendor registries, corporate filings. Nothing hidden. Just work no one wants to do. And buried in the tedium, I found it. A tiny supplier name, one I'd seen only once in a buried line item from our integration proposal. A company listed as providing enhanced data layer support, which was code for expensive fluff wrapped in technical jargon. But what caught my eye wasn't the service. It was the signature on their articles of incorporation. Evan's old friend, Mark Jeffries. They used to work at Maven Tech. Evan always talked about how Mark ran ops like a Swiss watch. I remember because he said it twice, like he was trying to make it sound true. Now Mark had popped up as a signatory for a tiny firm with a big appetite, and it had just started doing business with our company 6 months ago. I didn't say a word. I printed the registry doc, highlighted Mark's name. Then I stamped the page with my old rubber date stamp from my analyst days. The red ink bled just a little into the page's edge. I liked that. Made it human. I printed the vendor profile too, logged who approved it. Guess whose name showed up on the final review line? Adam from legal. That made things interesting. Adam had always been a bit too smooth. The kind of guy who said, "Let me worry about the language," when you raised an ethics flag. I never trusted that. And now, here he was again, in the chain. Just close enough to the action to steer it, just far enough to say, I was only doing protocol. The next day, he showed up at my desk. Smile tight. "Hey, just wanted to offer help if you're dealing with device issues. Happy to lock your hardware down for safety." I smiled back. "Thanks, but I've got my backups." He hesitated for just a beat. "Backups?" "Process docs, audit trails, clean copies." He nodded slowly, but his eyes darted. "That's smart. Let me know if you ever want us to do a sweep. You know, just in case." Just in case what, Adam? That same afternoon, a conference room on our floor got booked for a status review. Title only. No context. I walked by once, slow enough to catch the posture inside. Evan, Samantha, Adam. All three seated around the long table with nothing on their laptops, only paper. When people meet with paper, it's because they don't want metadata. I wrote the room number down, not because I needed it, because it deserved a record. Outside the room, our floor was all glass. You can't hear words, but you can see everything. The lean of someone's shoulders, the way they hold their pen, the glance that lasts too long. Adam looked tense. Samantha looked blank. Evan looked too comfortable. That told me the meeting wasn't about solving a problem. It was about shaping a narrative. And I was in it. I returned to my desk and opened the thread map. Added 2 more lines. Vendor. Integrate IQ, Mark Jeffries, signatory. Approval path. Adam L., legal, Samantha, exec ops. I didn't attach judgment. I just added timestamps and meeting names. That evening, I walked past the CFO's office again. This time the light was on, but she wasn't at her desk. Instead, 2 printed binders sat in the corner of her table, one labeled Q4 Client Path, and the other Integration Spend Summary. I didn't step inside. I didn't need to. I'd seen the cover design before. I'd made the deck those graphics came from. It hit me then. Evan wasn't just trying to block me, he was trying to recycle me. Turn my analysis into justification for his vendor shift, scrub my name off it, and hand it to leadership like it had always been his. And if something went wrong, that's when I'd be useful again. As the leak, the flaw, the dead weight. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I made 3 paper copies of the registry doc with Mark's name on it. I added the vendor profile with the procurement dates. Then I sealed each copy in an envelope and labeled them. Timeline A. 1 stayed with me. 1 went in my desk drawer at home. 1 went into my car's glove box. Not drama, just structure. Before I went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at my phone. No new messages, no news from leadership, just the quiet hum of absence. I thought about the first time I pitched a client solo, 14 years ago, in a rented conference room with a projector that hummed too loud and a client who looked at me like I was 12. I'd won the deal anyway, not with charm, with preparation, with accuracy, with the refusal to let someone else shape my story. That was the difference. Evan thought you won by being loud. I'd learned that you win by being the last one standing when everyone else has cut corners. They called it an information leak. The email landed at 8:03 a.m., 1 line above a corporate signature that smelled like sterilized panic. Due to concerns around data exposure during client negotiations, all vendor engagement under your scope will be paused pending review. I stared at the screen long enough for the glow to turn my coffee cold. No details, no proof, just a target. Me. Within the hour, HR summoned me to the 11th floor. Not to discuss, but to clarify. The woman waiting there wasn't new, but she had that brittle tone of someone rehearsing empathy for a living. She read from a prepared page without ever looking at me. We're placing you on limited duty, pending internal review, no travel, no client contact, effective immediately. It was procedural. It was supposed to sound fair. But the tremor in her second line, "You're not being accused of wrongdoing," told me everything. You don't say that unless you've already accused someone in private. I kept my tone even. Who requested the review? She blinked. Leadership. Which one? Collective decision. Collective. The word that means nobody's brave enough to sign their own name. She slid the printed notice across the table. You'll retain access to your internal workspace until the investigation concludes. Expect a contact from IT later today. I took the paper, folded it once, and said, "I understand." The walk back to my desk felt longer than usual. People didn't meet my eyes, but I could feel their awareness pulse like static. One or two whispered hellos they didn't mean. The air smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and fear. My badge still worked. That detail mattered, because if they hadn't locked me out yet, it meant legal wasn't finished writing the story. I opened my laptop. Email access intact, for now. My folders were untouched. The last thread in my inbox was from Evan, time-stamped 15 minutes before the HR call. "Need clarification on vendor escalation. Can you confirm your contact with the client?" I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. Instead, I opened my private notebook. Handwritten, off-network. 1 line per event. No adjectives. Just a record of sequence. 8:03 a.m. HR call. 8:17 a.m. HR meeting. 8:54 a.m. Evan email. 9:01 a.m. Legal silence. The timeline didn't lie. It never does. Around midday, Ronnie called. Her voice was lower than usual, wrapped in the quiet of a hallway conversation. "They froze our vendor process," she said. "The board wants to review the data path." "Who pointed them to me?" Pause. Then, "Someone suggested your team shared projections externally, without clearance." Someone. She didn't answer that part. "The audit committee wants something small to keep continuity. Training pilot, transparency review, low stakes, 30 days. They think it'll calm things down." A lifeline disguised as busy work. But 30 days meant access. Access meant I wasn't finished. "I'll do it," I said. "Keep it clean," she murmured. "I always do." After the call, I stared at the skyline beyond the glass. Winter light, hard edges, the kind of brightness that shows every flaw on the surface. By 3 p.m., my corporate chat went quiet. No pings, no invites, no replies. I tried logging into the main deal room. The cursor spun, then froze. Access denied. My office email dimmed next, like a light dying 1 flicker at a time. When I refreshed, the login page redirected to Access Pending Authorization. I closed the browser. That's when I realized this wasn't a review. It was a rehearsal for termination. I spent the rest of the afternoon packing data into sequence, not hiding, preserving, the audit trail of who had access to what, when, and why. I wrote it out longhand first, then typed it twice. Once for storage, once for the neutral channel that bypassed department heads. Subject line: Timeline review, Arlington contract engagement. Body: Attached are the sequential records of my communications, meetings, and corresponding system access logs. I'm available for full cooperation. No emotion, no defense. Just evidence breathing in a straight line. At 6:30, I took the elevator down. The security guard nodded, polite but curious. I swiped my badge. The light stayed green, still active. He watched me ride down alone. In the reflection of the elevator door, I barely recognized myself. Jaw tight, hair out of place, a kind of stillness sitting behind my eyes that wasn't fatigue. It was calculation. Outside, the cold cut through my coat. I walked the 3 blocks to the parking lot, replaying the HR script in my head. The pauses, the phrasing, the invisible fingerprints of whoever drafted it. Evans, probably. Or Adams. Someone who understood how to move guilt without naming it. At home, I sat at the kitchen table, turned on no lights, and let the city hum through the windows. The notebook lay open in front of me. On the next page, I wrote 1 sentence. They need me to be the story so they don't have to explain their own. Then I drew a single line underneath it. My kind of signature. I didn't plan speeches. I didn't fantasize about revenge. I just prepared. Because the thing about being framed is this. You can't outshout a story that's already written. You have to write a better one, and that starts with proof. When I closed my notebook that night, the sound was quiet but final, like a door shutting on the version of me that used to wait for fairness. Hook. The next morning, my email login just spun and spun, like a lie trying to remember its shape. Arlington smelled like old paper and filtered air. The building wasn't flashy. No logos, no polished reception. Just a directory taped inside a plastic stand and a bored security guard who barely looked up as I signed in. That's how you know it matters, when no one is performing. I took the elevator alone. The floors ticked up slow. On 7, I found the office suite. The sign outside the door read, Commonwealth Foundation, Civic Research Unit. A placeholder name. The real work was behind it. Dr. Elena Alvarez greeted me herself. Same crisp tone. Same navy blue cardigan and steady hands. Her expression didn't change when she saw me, but her eyes flicked once to the hallway behind me. Alone. That was what she needed to know. She led me to a small conference room. No windows, one table, 2 chairs, a whiteboard on the wall with nothing written on it. I have 20 minutes, she said. Let's use them. I nodded. I understand you're looking for an off-ramp. Something clean. A pilot, she said. Separate from procurement. Through our Civic Transparency Fund. A training module, something the audit committee can track without triggering flags. I reached into my folder. No laptop, no slides, just paper. I slid her a single printed page, a revised pilot scope, 1 client-facing module, 1 internal compliance overlay, metrics tied to engagement, not conversion. She read fast, didn't annotate, just nodded once and said, "You can deliver this?" In 30 days, I said. Clean data, no marketing overlay, and no competitive posturing. And the team? She asked. Just me. A pause. Then, why? Because noise is easier to shape when there are too many hands. I want signal. She folded the page and tapped it twice against the table. Okay, I'll route it through our secondary channel. Learning pilot, not vendor contract. You'll need to show outcomes, quiet ones. That's fine, I said. I'm not here to sell. I'm here to show what they were trying to bury. She looked up at me for the first time. Make it clean, she said again. I don't do messy, I said. We didn't shake hands. That kind of meeting doesn't end with a gesture. It ends with an understanding. I left the building without looking back. The train ride home was quiet. The carriage half full of commuters pretending not to see each other. I watched the tunnel lights strobe past the window and counted them like seconds. 23 lights. Then the platform. By the time I got home, it was dark. I dropped my coat on the back of the chair and opened my laptop. My corporate access was still frozen, but my backup files weren't. I pulled up the cleaned slide deck. The one Evan had forwarded without realizing he'd left my marks buried deep. Alternate text layers, placeholder metadata, template strings that carried my initials. Then I opened a new file. Arlington Pilot TIE Outline, v1.pdf. No drama, just structure. I built the framework in 5 hours. 1 module per week. Each with metrics mapped directly to outcomes, not impressions. No marketing fluff. No client manipulation, just process transparency and what should have always been there, logic and accountability. At 1:04 a.m., I sent it to Dr. Alvarez through her foundation's secure drop. The subject line was simple, pilot structure, 30-day model. Then I shut my laptop and just sat. The silence in my apartment was different now, not empty, just waiting. In the morning, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. My badge still worked. My floor was still full of people trying very hard not to see me. That was fine. I wasn't there to be seen. At 9:15, Adam passed my desk. He smiled. Too wide. "Morning," he said, like we were friends. I nodded. "Morning." And I let my eyes linger 1 second too long, enough to let him wonder what I knew. At 10:02, IT scheduled a meeting. Device inventory, asset reconciliation. That meant they were preparing to collect hardware, an early step in either termination or silencing. I accepted the invite without comment. Then I walked to the server room and printed the last set of logs I needed: meeting invites, call notes, metadata tags. All public, all legal. Just ignored by people who wanted easier stories. Back at my desk, I slid them into a new envelope and labeled it Redline Events, Source Copy. I dated it, stamped it, filed it in my home bag. At lunch, I sat in the back of the cafeteria, alone, watching the hallway glass. Evan strutted past once, laughing at something Samantha said. They paused near the fishbowl conference room, looking over a whiteboard filled with fake KPIs. I knew that board. I built it 3 quarters ago for a real project. Now it was being used to fabricate one. That's when I realized they'd already started shaping their next story, something they could show to leadership when the pilot started to breathe. A version that cut me out of the process entirely. Evan would say he advised, and Samantha would call it internal coaching. All of it repackaged, all of it polished. None of it true. But the pilot would live on paper, with my name, and some marks can't be scrubbed. That night, I walked the long way home, past the river, past the lights. I needed time to settle the plan in my head. This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. This was about making sure when the truth surfaced, it would come in complete sentences. He ran the demo without me. At exactly 10 a.m. on Thursday, Evan walked into conference room 4A with a swagger like he was stepping into a spotlight. He nodded to the client-side attendees on the screen, gestured to the junior rep at his side, and opened my slide deck. The one I'd built from scratch over weeks of research, projections, client insights, and regulatory overlays. Except it wasn't my version. Not anymore. He had stripped it. All the caution pages, gone. The risks I flagged, the scenario models, the adaptive paths built for transparency, all scrubbed. The core logic remained, but the warning bells were silent. What he left behind was a glossy performance, hollow and unstable. Ronnie texted me at 10:14. Ronnie. It broke. Exactly where you said. Mid-page 6. Ronnie. Jonah froze. Evan tried to pivot. Looked bad. Ronnie. We told them we'd follow up. Alone. I didn't reply right away. I reread her message 3 times, then locked my phone and sat still. Because this was the part no one ever prepares for. When the trap you set quietly, cleanly, actually catches something, and you realize they'll now panic. At 11:23, Adam showed up in the hallway. He wasn't looking for me. He was talking too loudly near the kitchen, trying to be overheard. I think she's taking it personal, he told someone. That's dangerous in enterprise. He meant me, subtle. A setup in a whisper. Classic. I made myself a tea, walked past them without blinking, sat at my desk and opened a clean email. To Evan. Subject: updated deck. Client version body. Hi Evan. Attached is the most current client safe deck version with corrected compatibility flags and amended integration notes. Let me know if you need help walking through it. No tone. No blame. Just my work. Complete and intact. He forwarded it to the client by 2 hours. I watched it happen on the shared drive notifications. He didn't even check the metadata. If he had, he'd have seen what I embedded. Not my name in the footer. He scrubbed that. Not my initials in the title. Those were invisible too. What he missed were the hidden tags. My initials on the chart layers. my comment bubbles embedded in white-on-white text. Fields you can't crop out without rebuilding the file from scratch. He'd sent my voice, coded into the bones of the slides, and signed his name over it. I didn't gloat. I documented. Every forward, every reply thread, every calendar invite tied to that version. Timestamped, indexed, filed. Ronnie messaged me again at 3:12. Ronnie. Client asked why the demo failed the compliance overlay. Ronnie. I told them I had flagged that section a week ago. Ronnie. I didn't say who I flagged it to. That pause meant everything. The office floor was too quiet for a Thursday. Meetings still happened, but the chatter had a new temperature. People lowered their voices, stopped screen sharing, and whenever I passed, someone always found a reason to stare just slightly harder at their monitor. That afternoon, I took a call from the Arlington Foundation liaison, Elena's assistant. The committee is watching the pilot closely, she said. They want a weekly update, and they want you to be the face. No proxies. Understood, I said. Do they know the context? They know enough. They just want proof that structure works better than spin. Then that's what I'll give them. I hung up and added that note to the folder labeled Pilot Tau Back Channel. I left the office at 6:02. Not early, not late, just consistent. On the elevator ride down, I stood alone. That's when the door almost closed. Then stopped. Evan stepped in. For a moment, it was just the two of us, 5 floors down to the lobby. Big demo, I said casually. He glanced over. Tight smile. Yeah, it needed some polish, but I think we got there. You sent the updated deck? He nodded. Of course. Good. It was the right version. He didn't know what I meant by that. He didn't ask. As we stepped into the marble lobby, he muttered, By the way, people are getting jumpy. Might want to ease off the internal noise. I stopped, turned slightly, looked him right in the eye. I haven't made a sound, I said. Yet. He blinked. Just once. Then walked off like he hadn't heard it. That night, I rewrote the pilot's Week 2 module, tightened the data fields, added a permissions ledger, and then I closed the document and sat in the dark for a moment, letting the silence press into my chest like a weight I wasn't afraid of anymore, because something had shifted. The noise wasn't mine. It was theirs, spinning faster, trying to cover the cracks. And I wasn't running. I was watching. The pilot worked. It didn't sparkle. It didn't parade itself in front of leadership. It performed. Quietly, precisely. Every metric met. Every line item traceable. The client's audit committee gave it a 1-line review. Operationally sound. Continue. Ronnie called after that meeting. Her voice didn't have excitement in it. It had something better. Relief. They want to keep going, she said. 2 more modules, same structure. No expansion yet, but the appetite's there. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Good, I said. Keep it boring. She chuckled softly. Elena said the same thing. Uninteresting is ideal. I smiled for the first time in days. That Friday, I received an internal notice. Invoicing paused pending compliance review. It was a copy of a finance flag. The field marked Internal Vendor Risk, Originator Conflict. And next to it, my name. No details, no explanation. Just the word conflict floating beside me like oil on water. They hadn't stopped the pilot. They were stopping me. I didn't waste time. I filed a formal report, not to Evan, not to Samantha. I used the neutral review channel built into our compliance infrastructure. It was buried 3 clicks deep in the internal portal, designed for whistleblower anonymity. I didn't need anonymity, I needed sequence. Subject, timeline, pilot engagement and procurement interference attachment, timeline, correlation.tdf, body, Please review the enclosed sequence of events. I remain available to clarify or provide documentation. Requesting neutral review of approval paths, client feedback, and invoicing justification. I sent it. Then I waited. Not for approval, for the clock to start ticking. That weekend, I shut down my work systems and spent Sunday rebuilding the Arlington files. 1 folder per week, 1 spreadsheet per result. Every comment from Ronnie, every data flag I'd cleaned, every placeholder Evan had erased, all mapped. Monday, Ronnie texted early. Ronnie, just FYI, client asked where the invoice is. Ronnie, I said it's internal delay, not your fault. Ronnie, Elena looped in legal on their side, quietly. That quietly meant they were watching now. Later that day, I got a call from someone I hadn't expected. Jenna, the internal controls auditor. She never dealt with sales. Her job was dry as bone. Finance integrity, trail reviews, system flags. I saw your report, she said, cutting right to it. We're escalating the review. I waited. She continued. There are 2 user accounts tied to the pilot slide deck. One is yours. The other was used to clone and modify the original file. Same timestamp, no version note. Who used the second account? She paused. It traces back to a proxy user assigned to Evan's assistant, but the metalog shows admin override. Only someone with Director Plus access could enable that. My stomach didn't turn. My hands didn't shake. That's how I knew I was past the point of reaction. Have you informed legal? I asked. We're routing to special review. The client's audit committee has also been notified via mutual compliance clause. It was moving now, out of Evan's hands, out of Samantha's too. And just like that, silence cracked. I saw it in how people changed direction in the hallway when they saw me, in the way Adam avoided eye contact when we passed by the printer station, in how the receptionist didn't smile as brightly when I stepped into the lobby. People were choosing. Some chose noise. They leaned into whispers, into stories that painted me as unstable, bitter, or emotional. The usual fallback when you can't control someone. But others, quiet ones, chose work. Jenna, Ronnie, Elena. They didn't throw themselves into my corner. They just stayed where truth lived. I updated my timeline. I added the proxy access detail, logged the invoice freeze, highlighted the meta flag on the document. 1 line per entry, no adjectives, just attendance. That night, I received a notification. Special Review Committee has accessed your documentation. No response, no follow-up. But that meant it had begun. At 9:43 p.m., I got one more message from Jenna. Jenna, counsel is asking for the version of the deck Evan sent the client. Jenna, do you have a clean copy of your original? I read that twice, 3 times. Then I pulled the archived folder and attached the document. Inside it, every slide was labeled with the original author tag, me. The edits Evan made were visible through version tracking. Even if he'd hidden the surface, the frame was still mine. I didn't say anything poetic. I didn't include a note. I just renamed the file. Original, deck, unaltered, proof, PDF, and sent it. After that, I sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker like code, silent and exact. This was no longer about being right. It was about clarity. Evan had stolen the language of stability. Now the real work was showing what he did with it. Suspended without pay. Pending review. That's how they phrased it. Like it was a breath being held, not a knife sliding in. The notice came via auto-generated email at 7:42 a.m. on a Monday. No signature, no subject line beyond, access suspension, HR policy to legal. The kind of message you can't reply to. The kind of message that wasn't written by a person, but agreed on by several. My badge still worked. That part felt deliberate, like a dare. So I walked into the building anyway, wore my normal coat, carried my normal bag, took the elevator to 15 like I had every other morning. And when I stepped out onto the floor, silence fell like snow. People saw me, and then unsaw me. A few glanced up, then dove straight into their screens like a script told them to. I heard someone in client dev whisper, "She's still coming in?" A pause. Then, "Isn't she, locked out?" Another voice. "Evan said she leaked something." No one said it to my face, but everyone said it with their posture. I walked to my desk. Laptop gone. Just an empty docking station and a folded post-it note. Inventory claim, file 1003, contact needed. Not needed. Filed. As if I were an expense being returned. The chair still had my sweater draped on it. I picked it up, folded it into my bag, and sat for a minute. Not working, just observing. In the cafeteria, voices dipped when I entered. I bought coffee anyway. Stood in line behind Jonah, who didn't even glance at me. The intern beside him clutched her badge like I might steal it. By 1 p.m., I couldn't log into my employee portal. By 3, my keycard stopped opening shared conference rooms. Not locked out, just subtly fenced in. The building was telling me, "You are here, but not part of this." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I went home. At my apartment, I opened the paper binder I kept offline. Timeline, deck edits, pilot milestones, Ronnie's notes, Jenna's access logs, every incident indexed to a date, clean, unemotional. I started writing, not a defense, not a memoir, just a document labeled Sequence Overview, Cross-Department Conflict, Preparedness Notes. I mapped the week in clean sentences. I wrote the original deck on September 7th. Ronnie's feedback came the 12th. Sharp and useful. 2 days later, someone forked the file. Metadata showed a second user. Evan sent that altered version on the 15th. The pilot launched September 16th. We delivered results by month's end. On October 2nd, invoicing froze. Conflict was the word they used. By the 4th, my access began to vanish. By the 7th, so did my paycheck. I attached no commentary, just facts in order, like footprints across dry ground. My phone buzzed. My mother. I stared at the name on the screen and let it ring out. She'd heard by now, probably from someone back home still reading business newsletters she doesn't understand. If I picked up, she'd cry. If I didn't, she'd worry. But I couldn't hold her concern right now. I was already carrying too much precision. My sister texted a heart emoji. Then, "Still standing?" I replied, "Always. Focus on class." I sat at my kitchen table, bare except for the binder, and let the quiet stretch around me. I wasn't afraid of the silence. I'd earned it. Tuesday passed without updates. Wednesday brought a single message from Jenna. Jenna. External reviewers acknowledged your document, said, needs review of comparative access. That meant someone was comparing who touched what. That meant light was beginning to cut through the fog. That afternoon, I opened the exported pilot results. I color-coded performance by feature group. Then I added a new tab labeled Risk Forecast Suppressed and populated it with the exact warnings Evan had removed from the original deck. Each note linked to a slide version. Each note time-stamped to before his edits. Then I emailed it to myself at a secure personal inbox. Not hidden, just clean. Thursday, I left my apartment only once, to walk the river. The city moved on without me, traffic still loud, buildings still hungry for attention. But I felt beneath it all something turning, a shift in air pressure, like a system resetting itself, not quickly, but permanently. Back home, I wrote one more page in my notebook. At the top, I wrote, what they wanted. A scapegoat, a clean line of blame, a silence that looked like guilt, a ghost they could say left the door open below it. I wrote what they didn't expect. Documentation memory, precision witnesses who don't need a stage on Friday. I got an email from Special Review. Subject, document review update. Body, 2 user accounts accessed the modified deck. Originating user not tied to your employee ID. Requesting any additional metadata for validation. I replied with the last untouched backup. Sent with the same signature I'd always used. Author, KL. Final draft, 0913. No commentary. Let the document speak. Let the order of things unfold. Arlington again. Same building. Same silence in the elevator. But this time, the air carried weight. Not fear, just the kind of thick anticipation that fills a room before a decision lands. I arrived 10 minutes early, not to look eager, to observe. The conference room had 1 long table, 2 carafes of water, and no centerpieces. 1 screen on the wall. A single HDMI cable laid coiled like a waiting question. The client's audit committee was already seated. 4 people. Neutral expressions. Dr. Alvarez among them, her cardigan navy again, her pen already uncapped. Across the room, our internal committee began filtering in. Jenna. 2 people from governance. Outside counsel. And Adam, stiff-backed and silent. Evan hadn't arrived yet. They left 1 seat open at the end of the table. Mine. No announcement, no fanfare, just a nod from the lead reviewer, who gestured toward the cable. You may begin. I plugged in my laptop. 1 file on screen, sequence. 10 points, .pdf. 10 lines. That's all. I didn't read them. I let the room read for themselves. 1. He said women don't close enterprise deals. 2. He removed me from the Chicago pitch. 3. The client halted the process after receiving a misrepresented demo. 4. Responsibility was assigned to me, without cause, without inquiry. 5. We launched a pilot anyway, quietly, through alternate means. 6. It worked. Measurably. 7. Finance froze the invoice, citing my name as conflict. 8. The modified slides Evans sent still carried my authorship tags. 9. Access logs showed admin override from Evans' assistant's profile. 10. The extra services vendor traces to Evans' former colleague. That was it. 10 facts. Each with traceable timestamps. Each with a document trail. I didn't perform. I didn't look for sympathy. I just let silence do the work. The client's chair leaned forward first. We'll be freezing all pending awards until your leadership changes. This process has not reflected operational integrity. Evan shifted in his seat, finally present. Red in the face, lips parting as if to speak, but the lead reviewer raised a hand. Mr. Talbot, please step out. The door clicked softly behind him. The internal committee turned toward Samantha next. She'd stayed out of the spotlight until now, all blank nods and empty phrases. But the question landed direct. Why does every road to accountability here seem to disappear in your corridor? She blinked. Once. Twice. Then said nothing. Silence isn't compliance, someone said. It's a system failure. Then came Adam's turn. You approve the vendor with direct personal ties to Evan. Your justification reads like a form letter. He inhaled. I only ensured documentation was in order. I had no knowledge of ownership conflicts. But you also offered to lock her device down, correct? Adam froze. That was presented as help. We read it differently now. The client's committee sat back, absorbing. Dr. Alvarez didn't look at me, but I saw her pen pause. I knew that gesture. Final notation. The reviewers turned to me. Is there anything you'd like to add? I shook my head. No, the documents speak. One of the governance reps nodded. They do. They didn't say, "You were right." They didn't say, "We're sorry." That's not how institutions work. But they said the only line that mattered: "We'll need to initiate structural changes immediately." After the meeting, I didn't linger. I passed Evan in the hallway. He was staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. Samantha sat 2 chairs down, arms crossed, not speaking. Adam paced in slow, useless loops. No one stopped me. Outside, the wind hit harder than expected. I didn't flinch. I let it pass. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I walked until the city felt smaller again, until my feet remembered I wasn't walking away. I was walking through. That night, I wrote one more line in my notebook. Power doesn't have to shout. Sometimes it just waits until the room is quiet enough to hear it. The review concluded on a Tuesday. No announcement, no company-wide email, just a ripple, felt, not spoken. Evan was terminated for cause. Adam was placed on indefinite leave, pending a secondary review. Samantha kept her title, but her department was restructured. She lost sales. She lost oversight. She kept the office, but not the power that used to walk in with her. The client signed the master agreement that same week. But it came with conditions, not suggestions, non-negotiables. Leadership change on our side, and me, named explicitly in the contract as executive sponsor, not honorary, not symbolic, stated, bound by clause and compliance as the person responsible for protecting process integrity. I said yes, but I added 3 lines of my own. On paper, initialed and dated, my name remains on all work I author. Reporting lines remain neutral. Any external disclosure includes visible traceability. Legal reviewed it, signed off. No celebration followed. No champagne. Just the quiet shuffle of calendars shifting, permissions changing, voices in the hallway recalibrating to a new reality. I moved into the empty VP office the following Monday. I didn't decorate. I didn't bring a plant. I unpacked a binder, a monitor, a single pen. The room smelled faintly like dry carpet and old ambition. The previous occupant had liked motivational prints. I took them down. People passed my open door and offered small nods. Some were genuine. Some were self-preserving. All were different from 2 weeks ago. On my first day, I started writing a new playbook. Not a manifesto, just clarity. Short sentences, sharp guardrails, process diagrams that showed where decisions got made and by whom. Language written to be read out loud without anyone squinting at the hidden parts. I titled it Clean Enterprise Deal Protocol 1.0. I worked until sunset, left the lights on, let people see I wasn't hiding. That evening, Ronnie called. No pleasantries. "They read the clause," she said. "They know you're named. Do they have concerns?" "No." One of them smiled. "Elena?" "Yeah." We were quiet for a moment. "Thank you," I said. It wasn't enough, but it was all there was. She replied simply, "You did what people are usually too scared to even try." I ended the call and sat in my chair with the lights off, staring out at the skyline. The windows reflected back a different version of me. Not a hero, not a survivor, just someone who didn't get erased. The next morning, I walked the floor before most arrived. The hum of the building felt different now, still sterile, still corporate, but honest. Jenna sent me a final audit confirmation. Subject, review outcome, document provenance, body, your timeline and deck authorship were confirmed, your cooperation is acknowledged in the final report. Case closed. I didn't reply, just starred the message. That afternoon, I hosted my first deal architecture session under the new protocol. 5 people, 2 from ops, 1 from legal, all hands on the framework. I opened the session with one line. "We're going to do this clean." No reaction, just pens moving. That's how I knew it landed. The room didn't need fire, it needed ground. Later that week, I passed Evan's old office. The nameplate was already gone. The door was cracked open. Inside, boxes half packed. Like he'd tried to leave fast but hadn't finished. On the wall behind his desk, a patch of paint showed where a frame had once hung. I stood there for a moment, not gloating, just noting the vacancy. Then I walked back to my office and reopened the playbook, drafted the section on accountability paths, drew a new diagram, one that didn't loop in circles. That night, as I locked up, the janitor passed me and nodded. He'd seen it all, never asked, never judged. "Long week?" he asked. "Long story," I said. He laughed. "Hope it ends well." I looked around the office, quiet, clean, still standing. "It's starting to." Final reflection. Revenge wasn't the goal. It was never about revenge. It was about not being erased, about making sure that when someone tries to turn you into the ending, you write your way back to the middle and then forward again. What I learned: silence is a language. And when you speak it precisely, people start to hear things they tried to ignore. My advice: keep records, know the sequence, don't shout, let the patterns speak. And when they come for your voice, make sure your work is louder than they expected. Then open the door and leave it that way.